So I was able to generate about $3 million in sales owning franchises, but my take on whether you should buy a franchise probably isn't what you think it is. Out of all the options out there, should you really buy a franchise? I mean, there are so many other options and ways that you can go, right? Well, the first thing that I'll ask you is opposed to what? If you don't buy a franchise, what's the alternative? I mean, you could start a business from scratch, you can buy an existing business, you could just change jobs or switch careers, or you could do nothing. So maybe the only question on your mind is whether you should buy a franchise or just keep doing what you're doing now. So in this video, let's have an honest conversation and figure out if this will be the right fit for you. So there are two different scenarios on when I think you should not buy a franchise. As much as I believe franchising to be the most proven business model in history, I genuinely don't think that franchising is for everyone. So the question really is, do you fall into this category? Well, let's dive in and figure that out. But first, let me get comfortable. In this video, let's talk about why you should or shouldn't buy a franchise. What are the pros and cons? When does it make sense to buy a franchise? When does it not make sense to buy a franchise? And what's your alternative options to buying a franchise? I mean, I bought my first franchise back in 2015. I still remember signing that franchise agreement and being asked to send our wire transfer for $25,000 to the franchisor. So this was no longer something my wife and I were just talking about. Like, we are doing this. It's kind of like getting clicked into a roller coaster that you've been in line watching people ride and scream, and now it's real. You're about to launch and there's no turning back. I remember when I first found out about franchising, I was 20 years old and I just got my first salary job as a personal banker. It felt like a huge deal because I was making 35 grand a year, which in 2023 with inflation, it's like making 50K today. So here I am at 20 years old, doing well, wearing a suit to work, college dropout, doing big things. But I really wanted to own my own business. I hated having to be at the bank every day at this specific time and be stuck there no matter how busy or slow it was. I didn't like getting scheduled on Saturdays, and I didn't like only getting 10 days of vacation. One day I was scrolling on the internet and I came across franchises of all things. So I'm looking into this thinking, that would be really cool to own like a McDonald's or a tropical smoothie. Then I start seeing $200,000 net worth requirements, $300,000 net worth requirements. And given I was a 20-year-old still living with my parents with like $2 grand to my name, my franchise dream didn't go too far at that point. Now I'll finish the story later and tell you about how I got into franchising. But before you can even know if franchising is for you, here are some numbers that you need to know. According to the United States Census Bureau, 10% of all businesses are franchises. So 1 out of every 10 business that you see is a franchise. There are over 800,000 franchise businesses in the US alone, and there are over 675,000 franchise owners in the US, and then 4,000 different franchise brands. So it's important to isolate the question about buying a franchise to if it's the right fit for you personally, because as a business model, it works. That's not up for debate. Because look, it's been proven in every industry that you can imagine. For whatever reason, most people think of food when they think about franchises, but here are some non-food franchises as an example. You got Ace Hardware, Jiffy Lube, Pods, Budget Blinds, Remax, the UPS store, Meineke. So just know there's something out there for everyone, because there are successful and proven franchises in pretty much every industry that you can think of. So this is really the most important question to ask yourself is, why? Why do you want to buy a franchise? Is it just that you want an additional income stream? Or do you have a strong desire to be an entrepreneur in your heart, and maybe you're stuck working in a career and an environment that's leaving you unfulfilled or happy? Are you trying to generate passive income or just an additional stream of income? Is this something you plan to be all in on, or you just think it's a cool idea? Look, here's my belief. The stronger your why is and the reason you'd want to own a franchise, then the more you should do it. The more it's just it would be nice or cool, then you probably shouldn't. Because business is hard and it's not for the faint of heart. In 2015, my wife and I bought our first franchise, and I was at the point in my career where I was making high 6 figures and not happy. I had tried to start 9 different businesses over the previous 8 years, and they all failed. So I had a really strong pain and discomfort in my situation, and that created a strong why. Look, there's a phrase that when you have a strong enough why, that you'll figure out the how. I wanted to be the difference maker in my family. I wanted to create generational wealth. I wanted to experience a different life that no one in my family had been a successful entrepreneur. I had really big goals and dreams in my life for me and my family, and that I truly believed that would only be possible if I was an entrepreneur. So my why was rock solid. Quitting or giving up, it was not an option for me. And if it is for you, you probably shouldn't do it. Again, if you have a strong enough why, you will figure out the how. Which leads to my second point, which is money. Speaking of money, I have something that will cost you zero of it. That's a complicated way of saying it's free. I have a free masterclass training on the 4 most profitable franchise buying strategies. It includes how to get funding and breaks down specific buying strategies. You can grab it, it's in the description below. So back to the story, remember 20-year-old Tarek that didn't have much money to my name? At that time, I figured franchising wasn't for me because I didn't meet the financial qualifications. What I hadn't thought about was partnering with someone, whether family or friends or just whoever. The fact is, in order to buy a franchise, you're going to either need money or know someone who has it. To buy most franchises, you need at least, bare minimum, $100,000 net worth. And you're probably needing to put at least $20,000 down for down payment. Now, what I didn't realize is that I was young, motivated, and willing to work and hustle. And there are people out there who want to own a business, but they don't want to manage the day-to-day. They don't want to be out there working and hustling. Opposites attract. In that situation, you just need to find your opposite. There's someone out there with money right now who wants a business partner that will run the business. But if you are not resourceful enough to figure out how to get the money, if you don't have it, then owning a business isn't for you yet. Now, let's talk about some of the pros and cons of buying a franchise. So con number 1 is that it takes money. Like, our franchise was $300,000 to get up and running. Franchises are gonna require more capital than if you just started your own thing. You can bootstrap when you're starting your own thing. This also becomes a pro. What do I mean? The more money you have invested, the less likely you're willing to just throw in the towel when things get hard or jump to the next shiny object. That's what I did before franchising. I never made it to the finish line with anything. When things got really tough, I'd just jump to the next idea. Now, when you have a franchise agreement, a 10-year commitment, and possibly a commercial lease you've signed, you can't just walk away. You can sell it, which is a huge benefit to franchises, that they're easier to sell than traditional businesses, because oftentimes a neighboring franchisee will buy you out. And a lot of people like the fact that you're buying into a system and a playbook. When I sold my stores, both buyers loved that it was a franchise. I doubt they would have bought it if it wasn't. Which leads us to number 2. Number 2 is you have a system and playbook to follow. When you buy the right franchise, it already has a proven track record. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of other franchisees that are successfully operating their business. So you don't need to figure it all out. I didn't need to come up with a menu or store design or graphics or logo or operational manual. I have a consulting company at the moment, and I just spent a couple of $1,000s in multiple weeks trying to finalize a logo. We've had to make all kinds of mistakes to figure out the processes and if our product fit was what the market wanted, and if our business model would even work. It's been incredibly difficult. When I bought my franchise, all of that was done. I just needed to follow the system. That's also a con to franchising. There are some of you watching right now who won't follow a system if your life depended on it. And let me be clear, this is not a criticism, but some of you are the type of people who would rather create the system. You don't want to follow someone else's system. And if that's the case, franchising probably is not for you, because the entire time you'd be not following the system, trying to reinvent the wheel. And that's not the point of franchising. Franchising is about following the playbook. It is still your business, you still hire your own employees, and you get to call the shots, but you do it through the overall system. Like, I couldn't just create a new smoothie or juice and throw it on the menu, but I could make a customer a custom order if they asked for it. Number 3 is that you get brand awareness. Now look, if we had opened our own smoothie shop, that would have been cool and all, but people wouldn't have known the brand. And that helps a lot. One of the coaches on our team owns 2 Little Caesars. Everyone knows Little Caesars. Pizza. Now someone might pull over driving by your store because they're like, oh, there's a Little Caesars, let's go pick up dinner. Now, if you were Tony's Pizza, maybe the customer never pulls over and comes in because there's no branding and experience with your brand. Next up is royalties. In a franchise, you are going to pay 5 to 10% royalties on all of your sales. Now, some people hate the idea of this. They say, I can make more without the franchise. Okay, then go do it. A lot of people who say that never wind up doing anything at all. I was just talking to a guy the other day and he said, yeah, I figured I could make more money doing it on my own. I was like, oh, okay, cool, great. So what do you do? Like, I was excited to hear about what he's built. And he's like, oh yeah, I work in defense contracting. So that's what I learned over the years, is that someone who wants to open a business decides not to do a franchise, and then they do nothing. They keep doing the same work that they've been wanting out of. Now look, I get it. Not everyone is wired to be the owner. I get that. But what I like about franchising is it gets you committed. For me, the dream was never to be a franchise owner. It was just to be a successful entrepreneur. Franchising was just a vehicle to get me to the destination. I was able to use franchising as a stepping stone to learn how to successfully operate a business and get my first real win as an entrepreneur. So that completely shifted my identity and my confidence. Not having to figure everything out allowed me to overcome a lot of obstacles that contributed to my failure in the 9 previous businesses I started. If you open a McDonald's, you get to use their logo and menu and operations, all through paying a percentage of your sales. It's really a genius business model that's just not for everyone. Now, if you like the idea of win-win and knowing that the franchisor's success depends on your success, then franchising could be a great fit for you. So what are some reasons not to buy a franchise? You might want to close your eyes for this one. So one of the first reasons to not buy a franchise is if you're just looking for passive income. Although it is completely possible to eventually own a franchise and have it be passive income, like I did that. At some point I was 2,500 miles away with one of my franchise locations, and I was only really working maybe an hour or 2 a week managing my manager, and my manager was running the business. So out of 3 years, I had only gone to our actual franchise like 4 times. But the first 8 months, I was there every single day working the business, getting it up and running. So if you're just looking to own a franchise just because you want passive income, in the beginning, you're gonna have to put in the work. You're gonna have to lay that foundation. So it's very possible to get passive at some point, or maybe you're only putting in 5 or 10 hours a week towards the business, but in the beginning, you're gonna have to put in the work. So another reason here is if you're someone who does not like to follow the rules. The entire point of a franchise is that you're following a system, you're following a blueprint. So for people that buy a franchise and then they want to tell the franchisor all the ways that they should be running the business or want to run the business, that's just gonna put you in a situation where you're gonna be stressed out all the time. You're gonna be arguing with the franchisor all the time. So if you're someone that doesn't like to follow systems, you don't like to follow rules, you'd prefer to just do your own thing and be a free spirit, then buying a franchise probably isn't for you. Next up is if you want to buy a franchise or just start a business because you want to work less. I get it. I get that you want to work less, but the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you're probably going to work more before you work less. And think about it. If you have a job right now and you're planning on starting a business or a franchise while you have your job, you now have an additional responsibility on top of your job. So if your goal is to get the business to a point where it's making enough money to replace your income, you're first gonna have additional work and additional responsibilities. Again, this is like the passive income thing. At some point you can get there. I would say probably 2 or 3 years down the line, but that first 2 or 3 years, you're laying the foundation. And look, everyone wants to be an overnight success. Everyone wants to result immediately, but the reality is it takes work. If you want to put in the work, don't do it. Now here's a scenario. Have you ever had someone that just cannot make a decision and they are just any sort of risk they cannot handle? Well, that's the perfect reason to not buy a franchise and really to not be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship involves a ton of uncertainty. It involves risk. You could work at something for a year or 2 years and put in a bunch of money and it may not work. So if you're someone that just kind of overanalyzes everything and you struggle to make decisions and you don't like any sort of risk, then I would say just stick with the status quo. It's okay. Not everyone is wired to be an entrepreneur. So what are some reasons that you should buy a franchise? Well, I think one of the perfect situations is a situation that I was in, which was that I had 9 failed businesses before franchising. I knew that I was destined to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. That I was very, very clear on. So maybe you're in the same situation, but I kept getting stuck and overwhelmed and just really couldn't figure out how to actually gain the momentum that I needed with a business. So if that's you and you know you're wired to be an entrepreneur, and that you'll just benefit from someone giving you the playbook, someone giving you a system that you know has worked. It's worked for dozens, if not hundreds of other franchise owners. And then you get to step in and go 100 miles per hour and do what you are wired to do, but with the proven system. Look, another reason here is when you have a really strong why. And I've talked about this before, which is when your why is strong enough, then you will figure out the how. And so again, if you're looking to buy a franchise and it's not something that's super important to you and it's just like a nice to have, then probably don't waste your time, because again, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. So if you have a strong why of why you're doing this like I did, then nothing will stop you. Last up is you're someone who's willing to put in the work. You're just that type of person. You work hard in everything that you do. Like, you just always show up. And if that's you, you're gonna do so well as an entrepreneur. My mindset in all the jobs that I worked was always to do more than I got paid for. My intention was always to over deliver and always produce whatever I could. And some people had that mindset as an employee and at work that like, hey, that's not my department, that's not my job. I never had that mindset. I was always willing to go hard. And so if you're that type of person, you're gonna do great as an entrepreneur because it's on you. So naturally, the next question becomes, well, what franchises should I be looking at? Well, in this video, I break down the top 10 fastest growing franchises by entrepreneur.com, and I break down all of the numbers, how much they cost, as well as how much do they make. Lastly, make sure to go grab that free masterclass below on the 4 most profitable franchise buying strategies. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.